So there are a lot of pain points that you may experience during a divorce, and chief among them, the granddaddy, if you will, of things that give people anxiety and stress during divorce is the concept of uncertainty. You're in a new process. You're not familiar with how it'll go. You're not sure about how it'll impact your future, how long it'll take, how your spouse will react, if you're able to reach decisions outside of court, or if you need a judge to decide. Uncertainty is the single most important thing for you to understand is normal, and then work with people who can help you figure out how to reduce the anxiety associated with that uncertainty. So how do we do it in Freed Marcroft? Well, there's some things that are uncertain, and there are things that aren't as uncertain. And so what's important is that we have candid, transparent discussions about those things. What is a thing that you know you'll have to wait and find out a little bit versus what's something that's relatively more predictable? This is all about having discussions so that you can have a better sense of where you are in your divorce and what the likely next steps are, how things are more likely to flow or go. You want to eliminate the things that aren't in fact uncertain by having competent, experienced counsel who's committed to being transparent with you. And that helps you be more comfortable with the things that are a little bit more uncertain. Another thing that people share with us that is one of the things that they're anxious about when they're entering the divorce process or even when they're in it is this feeling of loss of control over their lives. And this one, I think that if we flip our mindset and our thinking around it, we can really help ourselves navigate this point, this feeling of loss of control. What we're doing when we make decisions through the divorce process is we're deciding what we want for our future. And your lawyer's role in that process is to help you understand the reality you're dealing with, what's more or less likely to come next, how a judge or the other side is more or less likely to feel about something. And by breaking things down into baby steps and understanding what you're trying to decide and what the things you need to know at each of those phases, well, that can go a lot towards making you feel like you're back in control. Remember, you cannot control how other people act. You can't control how the judge acts. You can't control how your spouse acts, how their lawyer acts. You're not in control of any of those things. It's true. But what you're 100% in control of is your own decisions and actions. And once you think about things that way and take ownership of and responsibility for those decisions, well, guess what? You have control again. At the beginning of a divorce, there are a lot of things that are uncertain. And one of them, of course, is your financial security. What's going to happen with the finances? Well, this is one of the major things that happens in a divorce, right? How are we dividing property? How's alimony going to work? How are we paying bills? Is there any child support if you have children? Thinking about your financial security in the future, I would flip that and think a little bit more about what are your financial goals for the future? What does security mean to you? What kind of life are you trying to create? Who are you creating it with? Where is it? Where are you living? Where are you working? Are you starting a business? Are you going for a promotion? Do you want to change companies? Your holistic financial goals for your future will allow you to have a really empowered conversation with your lawyer about how those goals are likely to fit into the realities of your divorce process so that you can really craft a financial plan. So again, instead of thinking about your anxieties around your financial future, give yourself a little bit of a chance to dream and create a future that, of course, your finances are part of, And that will make you feel like you have more control over your decision making. And when you're getting information from your lawyer about how judges tend to view these situations, what's possible, what's less likely in Connecticut divorces, well, then you'll know that you're making a plan for the future that is realistic and likely, and you can go for it. Another anxiety during a divorce, of course, is there are all these legal complexities. It starts with, oh, when's my spouse going to get served? How's that going to work? How's it going to feel? How long is it going to take? What's this court date? What's that court date? What process should I pick? Should I be doing collaborative mediation? What the heck's a financial affidavit? There are all the nuts and bolts of what a divorce is and how a divorce resolves itself that, yeah, you're not a divorce lawyer. You don't know a lot about. So the first thing to do to kind of get back control over these confusing legal complexities is to make sure that you work with a legal team who prioritizes making sure you understand what's happening at each stage. You have a lot of control over the decisions you're making, but you want someone to help you break them down into baby steps, both the process and the outcomes you're seeking, so that you understand what you're doing when. And once it's demystified like that, once you're working through baby steps, not seeing this whole looming divorce process as an overwhelming thing bearing down on you, you'll feel much better that you're doing the right things at the right time and making progress. If you have children and you are in the divorce process, of course, how parenting is going to work is one of the major issues that you might feel anxiety about at the beginning of your divorce. Understandable, it's a huge part of your life. And those are the little people in your life that are the most important in the world to you. And I think that there are two pieces to this. There's how parenting is going to work during the divorce itself for the 6, 12, 18 months where you're going through the process. What's that going to look like? And then what are things going to look like after the fact? Where are people going to live then? How are the kids going to transition from one home into 2 homes? This is the way to think about parenting to make things a little less overwhelming for you. So when you sit down with your legal team, you want to think of it in 2 parts. The more immediate, how's parenting going to work at the beginning of the divorce or throughout the divorce? And then how parenting is going to look after. If you think about it that way, it breaks it into smaller, more manageable chunks, and it's much more realistic in the process itself for how things will be handled. You don't have to make every decision about custody and parenting on day one. We just need to make plans for stages as we get to them with an eye to the future when you're past the divorce itself. So have those conversations with experienced counsel so you can get knowledgeable guidance on how these things tend to work in a situation that looks like yours, in a family that has priorities like yours and the realities of everyone's work and living arrangements, so that you can get real advice stage by stage to build a plan on custody and parenting. Another reality of divorce is that there is going to be a point, or more than one point, where you just get a little fatigued. You get tired of being in the middle of the divorce process. Maybe there's conflict that you're trying to deal with. Maybe you're still living together. Maybe it's just sort of you're ready to get to the other side of it so that you can start living that future we've been talking about creating and being on the other side of the divorce. Well, when we work with clients on these issues, this sensitivity about the time of the divorce, one of the things that helps them when they're feeling more fatigued by it is to keep their mind focused on what their priorities are. And we talk about priorities in the context of the outcomes of the divorce, how parenting and child support and property division, alimony, how those are all going to work. And then we talk about your goals for the divorce itself. What's the investment of legal fees that you want to make in order to achieve those objectives? How much time are you willing to spend in the process itself to achieve those objectives? So when you're tired, it's helpful to reflect back on your priorities. Say you originally thought this sort of parenting plan that I'm hopeful for, that my lawyer shared with me, is one of the outcomes a judge would strongly consider. This is a huge deal to me. It's more important to me than how long the divorce itself takes. Well, when you're tired, if you have that touchstone that you've created when you were thinking about your divorce in terms of the outcomes and the legal fees and the time you're willing to spend, that might help you remember, yeah, I'm tired by my divorce, but my real goal was this parenting plan. Is that still my goal? It doesn't mean that you can't revise your goals and priorities. It doesn't mean that you can't change your mind, but it means that while you're changing your mind, you have the benefit of you, when you weren't tired, sitting down and really thinking about what matters to you. And that can help you in the heat of the moment make solid, reasoned decisions, even though you're tired. One of the pain points that sometimes people experience in the context of their divorce, it's not as common as the fear of the unknown or they're overwhelmed with the legal process, but it does happen that people experience a sort of identity shift in the context of the divorce, and they're experiencing changing familial relationships, changing social relationships. And that can be a little bit disarming. So there are things like, who do I spend the holidays with? We have this Thanksgiving tradition or that Thanksgiving tradition. How's that going to work? Where are the kids doing Halloween? How are we going to create new traditions for our children that are fun and yet reflect that our family is going from one home into two? But what about you? What about your identity as a spouse or a parent and how those things are shifting? That's really big stuff. I think that one of the most important things is just to be aware of the fact that this is something that people experience, that their sort of view of their self and their identity is different. And I think that it also can be a good idea to, when this stuff is starting to come up for you, think about finding a mental health professional that can talk you through these things. This is a perfectly normal experience to think, who am I in this process? Who am I going to be afterwards? For my 2 cents, I would think of who you get to be. Who do I want to be on the other side of this process? What do I want my identity to be? How can it reflect the things that matter the most to me? And if you take it from that perspective, this can be liberating and empowering instead of stressful. There are points in your divorce, almost inevitably, where you're going to have to make a really difficult decision, and that decision is going to have an impact on your future. So, how do you do it? How do you not get overwhelmed by it? We've actually designed our whole process around this to try and make sure that as early as we can, we're helping you prioritize the things that matter most to you. How do you prioritize the outcomes of the divorce itself? How is parenting going to work? How is money going to work? How are we dividing property or sharing cash in the form of alimony or child support? How do you prioritize those things and your objectives within them? And then what are your goals for the divorce itself? How much time are you willing to invest? How much are you willing to invest in legal fees to achieve your objectives from the end of the divorce? Things around parenting, things around financials. Revisiting those things over the course of your divorce. They're not solid. They're not locked down. You can change your mind, but having the benefit of what you went into the divorce thinking mattered the most to you can really give you guidance in the heat of the moment where the rubber is hitting the road and it's time to make decisions. So prioritize, review those priorities, and then let them be your guide when it's time to make real decisions. Those are the 8 biggest pain points that most people experience one or more of during a divorce. If you'd like to talk about any of them, or you're experiencing some other pain point that we didn't cover, please feel free to contact us. We'd love to talk it through with you.